Anyway, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Fellowship of Nanaimo. Our mission is to create spiritual connection and bring compassion, discovery, and social justice to life. My name is Diane Filipov, and I am your service leader this morning. My pronouns are she, her. Please take a moment now to silence or turn off your cell phones. Thank you. So let's say hello to everyone who's attending on Zoom. If you, as you may know, you turn around to the back and wave to that green frog on the wall. Whatever your ethnicity, race, theological belief, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, and everything else that makes you who you are, please know that you are warmly welcome in our community. We are grateful for a diversity of voices on Sunday mornings, and our services vary from week to week. If this is your first time with us, a very special welcome to you. If you are joining us online, please consider sharing your contact information with us. You can share it with the host by going to the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to welcome you to the community. We have a wonderful website, ufon.ca, and invite you to check it out for more detailed information about who we are, the services we offer, and how you can connect with us. We acknowledge today that we meet on the traditional territory of the Sunemus First Nations. As Unitarians, we are committed to the work of reconciliation required to address the harm done to all Indigenous peoples and their cultures by non-Indigenous peoples. We have much to learn from the Indigenous perspective, that the earth is the source of all life, and that our responsibility is to honor and care for it. Let us now enter into sacred time. Laura has kindly offered to lead us into worship through music. Thank you very much, Laura. That was great. We are delighted to have Reilly Yeo as our speaker this morning. Reilly is a candidate for ministry with the Unitarian Universalist Association and a co-founder of Climate Plan. Prior to entering seminary, she was the Director of Communications and Public Engagement at the David Suzuki Foundation, one of Canada's largest environmental charities. She lives in James Bay, Victoria, with her partner Jamie and their 2 children, Avery and Elyse, on the unceded territories of the Swenghung, a Lekwungen-speaking people. We look forward to hearing your reflection this morning, Reilly. Peace is not merely the absence of war, nor can it be reduced solely to the maintenance of power between enemies, nor is it brought about by dictatorship. Instead, it is rightly and appropriately called an enterprise of justice. Peace results from that ordered structure into human society and is actualized by our thirst for greater justice. In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement that our values may guide our choice. Let us look first to the response of love.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you that you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Good morning. My name is Wendy Ellen. I am the Director of Spiritual Exploration for Children and Youth, and my pronouns are she and her. And the story of all ages today will be Rosa Parks. Before I read the story, I just want to let you know that we have a fun fest today at 3 to 5 at the Bob and Debbie Goodmans. So just come talk to me after if you want more information. It's also posted on the wall. We're going to celebrate in bulk the comings of spring. So, thank you. Rosa Parks. Written by Mary Nin and illustrated by Yulia Zolotova. Hi, I'm Rosa Parks. I grew up in a time of segregation, where black children like me couldn't get a bus to school that was designated for white children. Unfortunately, school bus transportation was unavailable in any form for black school children in the South. Arsonists tried to burn my school down twice just because they didn't want black children to get an education. I used to get bullied too by some of the children in my neighborhood, and sometimes I would get into fights trying to stand up for myself. In time, I got married to a wonderful man. My husband was a civil rights supporter, and I joined his campaign. We believed in equal justice, and we were committed to achieving it too. Protest, injustice, equality, integrated schools, freedom does not include segregation. The lack of justice for people of color and the daily mistreatment that I observed and endured was too much to bear. One day, I boarded a bus and paid the fare. I chose a seat, but the driver told me to follow city rules and enter the bus again from the back door. When I exited the vehicle, the bus driver drove off without me. I was really sad about it. Another day, I resisted being kicked out of a bus seat to make room for a man just because he was white. I refused to move, and the bus driver had me arrested, though I had committed no crime. My arrest sent a message to people loud and clear, and a boycott of the buses began. People demanded fairness. Today's mighty oak tree is yesterday's nut that held its ground. I became a very famous face in the civil rights movement, which of course also attracted a lot of negative attention from people. But the more they tried to silence me, the more outraged we became. We began a campaign called the Montgomery Bus Boycott, which proved to be effective. Boycott buses, Montgomery Bus Boycott, say no. My work ended segregation on public transport, and I devoted my whole life to campaigning for equality. Though I'd been afraid, I did what I knew was right, and it changed the world. I believe we are here on the planet Earth to live, grow up, and do what we can to make this world a better place for all people to enjoy freedom. The end. And she is one of my heroes. I really admire Rosa Parks. And those buses lost a lot of money. Thank you. This is today's meditation, and it will be followed by a minute of silence, and I'll ring the chime after that minute has passed. In a world so filled with brokenness and sorrow, it would be easy to lose ourselves in never-ending grief, to be choked by our outrage, to be paralyzed by the enormity of suffering, to feel our hearts squeezed tight with hopelessness. Instead, this morning, let us simply breathe together
as we hold our hearts open. Breathing in as our hearts fill with compassion. Breathing out as we pray for healing in our world and in our lives. Breathing in, opening ourselves to the transforming power of love. Breathing out as we pray for peace in our world and in our lives. Breathing in as we hold hope in our hearts. Breathing out as we pray for justice in our world and in our lives. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Breathing in, we are the prayer. Breathing out, we are the healing. Breathing in, we are the love. Breathing out, we are the peace. Breathing in, we are the hope. Breathing out, we are the justice. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Amen. Blessed be, may it ever be so. Reilly.
Hello. So it's always a little bit unnerving to preach for the first time, to deliver a reflection for a congregation that you don't know. But in this case, although you don't know me, I do feel like I know you a little bit, because I've heard such good things about you from Reverend Deborah Thorne, who supervised me for 2 months during my internship at the First Unitarian Church of Victoria when the Reverends Lingood were on sabbatical. So Reverend Deborah mentored me through the first time that I led a ritual during a medically assisted death, and also through leading my first memorial. So I was so grateful to learn from her, and also to learn what a great congregation you are, seeing you through her very loving eyes. And also Reverend Deborah Falk, she had me over for tea with the message, "You've got to get up there. It's such a special congregation." But the first way that I learned about you was in a UU history class that I took, where we were given an assignment to research and write about a social justice project in a local congregation, and I chose to write about the Unitarian shelter. So I know so many UU congregations, and if you've been part of others, you may know this too, they really struggle to walk their talk, so their members often feel like we hear and we speak a lot about values, but we just aren't really sure how to put those values into practice. To put love into practice in public as justice, to quote Reverend Deborah and Cornell West from last week. As a longtime activist, I really empathize with this. So I like talk. You know, I probably wouldn't be becoming a minister if I didn't. But I also really like action. So I love it that instead of just shutting the shelter down when you realized it was really too much for the congregation to manage, you found another responsible steward in the Nanaimo Family Life Association so that the good, justice-seeking work of this fellowship can continue with support from those with greater expertise. So you're a community that is already dear to my heart, even though I'm meeting you for the first time. And that's in part because housing is also an issue that is very, very dear to my heart. I grew up in Richmond, BC, as the only child of 2 disabled parents in a BC housing complex, where the cost of our housing would fluctuate based on our always limited income. So this is a model that we sorely need more of today. So we lived either paycheck to paycheck or social assistance check to social assistance check, depending on my father's health and his ability to work, but we always knew that we had secure housing because no matter what, our housing cost 30% of our income. So I lived in the same quite beautiful little complex from the time I was born until the time I was 18. I knew through this experience from such a young age that poverty was wrong, and I felt its injustice keenly. So poverty, despite becoming an environmental activist, poverty will always be my first source of heartbreak. The kind of heartbreak that helps you know what justice means to you. The kind of heartbreak that weaves you closer to those who feel it too. The ways that acting for justice together can connect us, even to those we've never met. So when I first was given the topic for this week, justice, my heart sank a bit. I'll admit, it feels like such a hard time to preach about justice when injustice feels more rampant in the world than ever. Everything from the horrors that are unfolding in Gaza to the injustice of another potential Trump presidency despite Trump's many crimes, to the injustice of who is losing more from climate change as the climate emergency intensifies, as in those who are least responsible for rising greenhouse gas emissions, those who have benefited the least from fossil fuels. So I really don't consider myself naive. I've been an activist for a long time. I've worked on so many different issues. I've seen how broken and how unjust our systems are. But I'll admit that I've been surprised by how much housing justice in particular has degraded, how much that issue has actually gotten worse, even in our own backyards. I've been scandalized by how many more people experience housing insecurity now than did in the 1980s when I was growing up. So I had to do some digging, some deep digging, to connect to justice as a topic. And I thought of the words on justice that have inspired me the most in my life, many of which Reverend Deborah also spoke to last week, like justice is what love looks like in public. I guess many of you have probably also heard the famous Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." You may also know that he actually got that quote from Theodore Parker, a famous 19th century Unitarian minister who was an ardent abolitionist. He worked very hard to abolish slavery. He wrote his sermons with a gun in his desk to protect the runaway slaves that he had hidden in his home. And the quote is from a sermon titled "Justice and the Conscience" that Parker delivered in 1853. He said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." Like Parker said, it's hard to see the bend towards justice sometimes, especially these days. But now we also know that the universe really doesn't arc over us, traveling across our horizon. It's more like an infinite field stretching out in all directions all around us. that it's not a vast empty space, but rather populated with billions of other galaxies and more energy than we can ever imagine. It's also receding away from us at a rate that's almost impossible to comprehend. So this is an image from the James Webb Telescope of Stephan's quintet, 5 galaxies that contain sparkling clusters of millions of young stars, many only now being born. That vastness is humbling. It reminds us that the correct relationship to the universe is humility. It reminds me, personally, of the saying from Jewish wisdom traditions, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it." Rather than being overwhelmed by the enormity of suffering, of injustice, I try to experience it like the vastness of space. Reason for humility in the face of the sacred and sublime immensity of existence. A grand cosmic mystery of creation and destruction in which I constantly have to dig deep to discern the part that I am called to play. Some of my earliest activist work was with Amnesty International. So their model of millions of people taking the simple act of writing a letter and then coalescing that into meaningful change to save the lives of brave people all around the world through the letter writing campaigns that they would do to free political prisoners. That model was so appealing to me. The ways that justice can connect us across time and space, each person taking a small action, but finding a larger collective with whom they could coalesce, like stars coalescing into a galaxy. I also really loved and was drawn to the image in their logo of the candle surrounded by barbed wire, of their slogan, "It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness." This was long before I discovered Unitarian Universalism, with our symbol of the flaming chalice. Part of what made finding Unitarianism like a homecoming to me. We know what a good idea it is to light a candle. That lighting a candle improves almost any situation. So I've worked for justice in lots of different ways in the world, but what has brought me here now into Unitarian Universalist ministry, into this fellowship with you today, is the sense that we need more people in this work for justice, and that faith-based groups like this fellowship have a special role to play. So part of the reason that the civil rights movement achieved the kind of scale and effective disruption that it did was that churches played a central role. So churches were the funnel for ordinary people to coalesce, to strategize together, to take their deep grief at injustice and turn it into organizing, like the kind of organizing that created the Montgomery bus boycott. So since the civil rights movement, much of the world has become more secular, especially here, a development that I, like many of us, do celebrate to the extent that it represents a turning away from the irrational and from the divisive elements of religion. But also, the collective power of churches in this part of the world has declined. And we still need organizing models of groups that can bring people together to form deep relationships, to learn to disagree effectively, to hone their shared beliefs and to turn them into power. So when we think of churches and politics now, probably what we think of is all the ways that churches prevent a more just world from emerging. So churches fighting against marriage equality, against reproductive rights, against even democracy. But personally, I'll be damned if I'm going to sacrifice this organizing model, which brings people together in a unique and powerful way, to the opponents of justice. So we also know that we can't just succumb to, or worse, exacerbate political polarization. where we just refuse to talk to anyone who believes differently than we do. And this requires that we do our own inner work, that we work on becoming less reactive, less defensive, more compassionate, but at the same time, more fortified, more committed, and more clear. Faith groups are important because they bring together this external work in the world with the internal work on ourselves that allows us each to know what heartbreak is calling us to do, what candle we need to light, what part of injustice is ours to confront. So not everyone is going to be an activist, and certainly not everyone needs to be. Not everyone is going to get to be disruptive to the system in their day job. But Unitarianism is a place where everyone can find a way to fight for justice, whether that looks like rallies on the streets or providing safe places to sleep and showers for those who need them. So I will admit, I don't share Parker or King's confidence that the universe is bending or expanding towards justice. Part of my ministry is I run these workshops on climate anxiety through an organization that I help run called Climate Plan. In one of those workshops, we spend quite a bit of time on the all-important question of hope. Are you hopeless? Are you hopeful? Or are you hope-free, as in not attached to one particular outcome or another? I encourage participants in those workshops to dig deep in order to discern their own personal needs with regards to hope. Some people need to seek out and cultivate hope. Some people need to find space and tools to confront their hopelessness. Others need to fall more deeply into the present moment and let go of future fears and future hopes. So whether you personally see humanity expanding toward justice or not, thank you for being here today. For meeting our obligation as human beings to find the unique work that is ours to do, and to meet our obligation as Unitarian Universalists to our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and to our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. So for me, for all the years that I've now been UU, I still find something in services that reinvigorates my willingness to work for justice in the world. Some days it's hope. Some days it's the space to confront my hopelessness. And some days it's just a regrounding into the present moment that frees me from attachment to particular outcomes. So I remain grateful for the space our community provides, for people to sleep in safety and be treated with compassion, for those of us with the means to discern how best to do our part to keep trying to bend the human will, especially the will of the powerful, towards justice. So as the universe expands away from us at an unthinkable rate, let's be grateful for this chance to expand our souls too as we breathe together. As we fill our hearts with compassion, and as, breathing out, we become justice together. So thank you for being a candle, for lighting your candle every week and each time you work together in fellowship. May our chalice light continuously draw us to a renewed commitment to justice. May it be so, and blessed be.
It's time now for today's announcements. Back there. Is there anyone in the hall who would like to make an announcement? I see someone coming up. Dead.
So I'm Debbie, she, her, and I'm here to talk about a kind of fundraising we used to do. We used to have a goods and services auction every spring, and people would offer for sale, for a donation to the fellowship, something that they were good at. Like if somebody could bake wonderful pies, you could bid and they would bake you a pie. Or if they were good at baking muffins, or weeding the garden, or they would offer rides to the hospital if somebody didn't drive. But I don't bake well, and I'm not a great driver. But I would like to kick off the season. We are not going to have an auction event because none of us really has the energy to organize one, but that doesn't mean we can't offer things for sale for a donation to the fellowship. So I'd like to kick it off by offering a custom Sunday service. And this has a fixed price. This is $350 to the fellowship. And for that price, for the bidder, I will do a Sunday service, the whole thing. I'll work with Leah on the music and Wendy on the story and the Sunday services team to pick out the reading and meditation on a topic of your choosing. Now, we did this a few years ago. You may remember Sam Costco was the high bidder, and he wanted a service on quantum physics. And Karen Fraser Gitlitz was our minister, and she did a fabulous, she had to learn about quantum physics first, but she did, and she did a service on the spirituality of quantum physics. Now, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You want me to do a service on chocolate ice cream and why you love it? I will do that. It doesn't have to be heavy. It can be lighthearted, but we can do a Sunday service on pretty much any theme. So I'm going to invite people to think about this and bid on it. It can also be a group of people. People can pool their money. Whoever comes forward first, $350 for the congregation. You get to be king for a day. There are some Sundays left this year. I will write and deliver the service of your choice. Thanks.
Now that people are attending services both in the hall and online, we have updated how we accept donations and pledges to support the fellowship. If you're in the hall, if this with us, your presence is your contribution. Those online can go to our website and click the big blue donate button at the bottom of the homepage and follow the instructions to donate via e-transfer or check. To help the wider community, 50% of all anonymous donations received are donated to the designated charity of the month. Our charity for the month is the Nanaimo Youth Services Association. If you're donating online or by check, these are not anonymous. So if you wish to contribute to the charity of the month, you need to note that on your e-transfer or check. We are nearing the end of our service. After we sing Carry the Flame, we have the opportunity to join a social group. There are breakout rooms available, both online and in the hall, for the next 30 minutes. If you want to join an online breakout room, stay online, and the host will put you in one. Thank you for your participation this morning. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power, correcting everything that stands for love. It's also Martin Luther King. But not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we hold in our hearts until we are together again.